Is Welsh domestic regional rugby about to depart the URC and head to the Premiership? Is there going to be an Anglo Welsh league? Yeah, that old chestnut. A little bit of a detour from the international rugby and the British and Irish Lions that's on at the minute. And it feels like this story or variations of this story come around like clockwork every couple of months. It's always Premiership expansion, URC and Premiership mergers, Anglo Welsh leagues, Wales cutting the number of regions, and several of those things have come together in this one story, which has broken in the last 24 hours, even less than that. And yeah, Anglo Welsh League moves close if Wales cuts two teams in new twist. What is your gut feeling when you look at that story? What substance do you think there is, if any? And if there is substance, what do you think about the merit of, well, firstly, Wales cutting four regions to two, and then those two remaining regions joining the Premiership and departing from the URC? First thing to say, this is the Wales Online, so this has to be taken with a pinch of salt. Not always known for the thorough, robust accuracy, and I suspect in this case, this might be someone, a source that's referred to in the story. I think this might be an agenda trying to get their own story out there to either test the water or try and get the ball rolling on something. But I'll come to that. But let me know what you think in the chat down below. So I say the Wales Online needs to be taken with a pinch of salt, but think back, a couple of months to that professional rugby agreement in Wales and Wales Online saying that two regions were going to be cut. Now, that story, as it turned out, and it was broken on Wales Online, wasn't completely accurate. It also wasn't completely wrong either, and there was more than a grain of truth in the story, although the actual specific details weren't totally accurate. Within a few hours of the story coming out on the Wales Online, WRU were out getting their story straight and saying, no, nothing's been decided. We're just considering what we're going to do in a couple of years' time. I suspect something similar is going on at the heart of this, and I suspect at the heart of this, there is some genuine substance to this story, but I don't actually think this is a story that starts with Welsh Rugby and the WRU. The sense I have, and it's alluded to in the story here, and it also tallies with what I'm hearing from sources. This is an England rugby story first and foremost. It says in this article, quote, sources in England told Wales Online there is a strong desire within the English game to add two extra teams to the Gallagher Premiership, with both PRL and the RFU in favour of including a couple of Welsh clubs. Now, that's the noises I'm hearing as well. And what I mean by that is not about the Welsh clubs specifically, but that there's a desire to have more clubs in the Premiership. And I also think this tallies with the fact that it looks like the franchise model for English domestic rugby is coming. I think Prem Rugby are going to... I mean, it's a totally separate conversation, but I think Premiership Rugby is going to shut the shop. They've been giving for years all the lip service to promotion and relegation. I don't think they ever wanted it. I don't think they ever had any intention of actually introducing it. And I think they're going to very, very soon pull the ladder up, shut the trapdoor, and I think that could have grave consequences for grassroots rugby in England. That is my concern, is that it will have a massive impact as you move down the chain in English rugby. And it's a completely separate conversation, but let me go into that briefly. The way I look at the situation, and you may have a different opinion, and certainly the Premiership clubs, Premiership Rugby, and even those in high positions at the RFU appear to have a different position. But my position is the Premiership owners, out of their own choice, not because they had to, Premiership owners chose to spend millions and millions of pounds that they didn't have. They chose to do a deal with CVC to hand away effectively the family silver for a cash injection up front. Maybe they felt like they had no choice, but whatever, they did that. And I think they did that because they thought that there was going to be huge TV deals down the line, and therefore it wouldn't matter that they're giving away 27% to CVC. And what actually happened is the broadcast deals went down rather than going up. And the Premiership clubs find themselves in a situation where they are struggling to make a profit. They have spent beyond their means and are trying to catch up. The debts that they've already accrued are, really hampering them in terms of making plans to go forward. And as a result, they are taking care of themselves. I understand their prerogative, but they're going to pull the ladder up, shut the league off, close ranks, and I think that will have big issues for the English game top down. I mean, look at it. The Premiership clubs can't even sell the clubs. There's so many Premiership clubs that have been trying to sell to a buyer, but outside of Newcastle getting the new leadership from Red Bull, presumably at a very cut price deal, no one wants to buy Premiership clubs. That's the situation they've got themselves in. As I say, that's a totally separate conversation, but I actually think that is what is at the heart of this. It's the Premiership clubs going, yeah, we're going to shut the shop. We're going to create a franchise system. We could do with 2 more teams. And at the moment, yeah, 10 teams is not enough. There are whole chunks of the season where there is no Premiership rugby. You can have clubs with no home game for 2 months at a time, and you cannot build a sustainable business on that basis. There's whole chunks of the season where you have like 6 weeks with no Premiership game. When the Premiership rugby comes around again, you have to kind of go, who's top of the league and who's bottom and who's doing well and what players are playing well. 10 teams is not enough, I don't believe. And so I understand why they would want to increase that. Currently, Worcester are going to go back into the Championship. They've got the ground, they've got the history, but they're not there yet. London Irish and Wasps, 2 great names of English rugby. Really sad what's happened to them. They're not in a position to go up. And the Championship clubs that do exist, Champ Rugby from this season, they've been underfunded, or their funding has been cut so much by the RFU for so long, and they haven't been given a realistic route to aspire to get to the Premiership in the way that Exeter Chiefs did and succeeded and thrived, that those clubs are in a very, very different position now than they were 10 years ago. More's the pity. And so bottom line is there aren't viable clubs that can, as the Premiership would see it, come in and be really competitive on day one. But if Wales were to cut their regions from 4 to 2, condense the talent that they've got, then 2 sides could be genuinely competitive and be brilliant additions to the Premiership. That's what they are thinking. What do you think about that? Because that's the other half of this conversation. Yeah, the Premiership clubs might want 2 Welsh teams to come and join them, but would the Welsh teams want to? So what are the merits of that? What are the merits of Welsh teams moving to the Prem? Well, travel would be massively reduced because they share a landmass, and in some cases a derby match would be a game between an English and a Welsh team. Look at Bristol and Newport, separated by a bridge and a small bit of water. That could be dynamite. The proximity of the teams, the history of the fixtures go back years and years and years to pre-professional and long, long before. That, on its own, on its face, generates interest, which I think generates crowds. And we have seen when Anglo Welsh games have happened in Champions Cup, Challenge Cup, it has drummed up a little bit of interest. And that does translate to money. So I think purely on those bases, and when you think of the URC, there's a lot of travelling involved, and 4 sides having to travel to South Africa a couple of times a year, you can understand why the WRU might be looking and going, that's a lot of cost, and we're struggling at the minute. So if they wanted to keep 4 teams, then that would take a lot of travel off. But the talk is about 2 teams, and there definitely seems to be a desire, or at least in the background, even if they're not saying it outright, there seems to be in the background, it's a when, not an if, they cut the number of regions either to 3 or to 2, which would be so harsh for whichever groups of fans are affected by this. And I feel really sorry for them. I do think there's logic to it. Look at Scotland, more similar kind of population and cities and stuff. It feels more alike to Wales. Wales having 4. You do think if they condensed it to 2, if you just take the clubs and the crests and the kits and the fan base, which is really, really important, don't get me wrong, if you just take that out of the equation, I can see the merit in fewer Welsh regions. I think it would increase the product. It would condense the talent. It would mean that the players that do have contracts could have better contracts. I think it would benefit the national team because they'd be able to compete on the higher stages later in competitions, get to knockout stages and that kind of thing, and that would benefit the Welsh team. There'd also be the benefit of cohesion. You see that with Ireland and all those players that play for Leinster. You see what it's done for Scotland with, having a real core group of combinations at club level. And I think you would see that a little bit more. But how do you square that circle in terms of Cardiff, Newport, Ospreys, Scarlets? It's really hard. Well, here's some wild speculation to finish. If an Anglo Welsh league were to happen, which regions would you pick? I mean, there's speculation, and I kind of like the sound of East and West. And you sort of take Cardiff and Newport and the whole eastern side of that south of Wales, and you take that as one, and then you don't need to, and you could have a West, which means you don't totally get rid of Scarlets and Ospreys. I don't know, you could spread where the games are played. But again, that feels a little bit like going further down the line of what Ospreys did, where they brought together Neath and Swansea, which are not natural bedfellows. In fact, they are rivals, and it feels like it might just dilute it again. If you were going to have Welsh Regions cut from 4 to 2 and join the Premiership, it would make sense to keep Newport and Cardiff, wouldn't it? Just in terms of pure proximity, nothing to do with rugby, nothing to do with fan bases or just proximity. You could imagine a lot of people heading to Cardiff and Newport from Bristol, from Bath, from Gloucester, even from London. London to Cardiff on the train, no big deal whatsoever. And the Arms Park right in the middle of town. So, and Newport, same goes. So, it feels so harsh. I think that could have some legs long term. And I'm not saying whether that would be right or wrong. I'm just saying I can understand the business case for it. And unfortunately, rugby is about nuts and bolts and pounds and pennies. And there's not a lot of it knocking around in rugby at the minute. And I think that is what is motivating a lot of the decisions. I think that's what's motivated this story to bubble out via a source, maybe to test the water and see how people feel about it. So tell me how you feel about it. I can see it happening. I think, I'd love to know what fans of the URC would think. I don't know. I'm making no judgment on it. I think the URC is growing as a competition year on year. And I think there's a massive case for Wales just to dig in and try and make a success out of that competition. I can see the attraction of an Anglo Welsh league purely because of the numbers of bums on seats you could get at games as a result. Not to mention the fact, talking about Saracens, Harlequins, the number of Welsh people living in London, just for example. So I think there could be legs in this. So again, I think it could be one of those situations where you say, yeah, it's Wales Online. They're not normally accurate or can be inaccurate. They might be not totally accurate, but I think there's probably more than a grain of truth. We will wait and see what, if anything, bubbles on from this conversation. Let me know what you think.